I moved to Pine Brook last December. I was 32, a schoolteacher, ready to leave city life behind. The snow-covered town felt peaceful, and I looked forward to cozy nights in my new home. My first evening, I settled by the fireplace. I had a good book and a cup of tea. Everything seemed perfect. But then I heard a soft tapping at my window. At first I thought it was just the wind. When I looked out, I saw nothing but swirling snowflakes under my porch light. I shook my head, trying to forget about it. That night, sleep didn't come easy. The tapping echoed in my mind. As the snowstorms continued, the tapping came back. I was wrapped in a blanket, lost in another book. The noise grew louder, almost frantic. My heart raced. I glanced outside again. The backyard was still, but I felt something different. A chill crept up my spine. The trees moved strangely in the light. I wondered if it was my imagination. Then while cleaning my attic, I found old newspaper clippings. They were about disappearances in Pine Brook. Most happened in December. One article caught my eye. It was about a family that vanished during a snowstorm. My skin crawled. It had to be a legend, right? I tried to brush it off. With every snowstorm, the tapping returned. My neighbors seemed odd too. They glanced at me with worried eyes. I felt as if something was watching me. Was I just overthinking? I didn't know anymore. One night the tapping turned to pounding. My heart raced. I stood frozen for a moment. I opened the window and called out, "Who's there?" Silence. The air felt heavy. I looked around. That's when I saw a shadowy figure near the trees. I blinked and it was gone. I gasped. My breath turned shallow. I felt scared, confused. Why was this happening? The next day I decided to ignore it all. I focused on my teaching and tried not to think about the tapping or the shadows. But the feeling of dread lingered. The clippings haunted me. Then one night, the pounding turned urgent. I felt like I could burst. I opened the window again. "Is someone there?" I shouted. Nothing. The darkness stared back. But I could feel it, something lurking just outside my vision. I couldn't take it anymore. I raced down to the town hall the next day. I asked the librarian if she knew about past events. She just stared at me. "You should leave Pine Brook," she said, her voice shaking. "It's not safe here." That night I curled up in bed. I felt the tapping start again. It was loud, like someone was begging to get in. I squeezed my eyes shut, telling myself I was imagining things. Then in the deep quiet I heard a voice whisper, "You're one of us now." My heart dropped. I turned to see who was there. But nobody was around. It was just me and the cold shadows of my house. I realized I was trapped, and it felt too late to escape. The next day I barely made it through my classes. The children in my classroom laughed and chatted, but my mind was elsewhere. Every tapping noise echoed in my head, each laugh turning into a reminder that I was being watched. At lunch, I confided in my colleague Sarah. She always had a way of listening without judgment. "Have you ever felt like something's off in Pine Brook?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me with pitying eyes. "What do you mean?" "The tapping at night, the weird shadows. I found newspaper clippings about—" "Stop," she cut me off, her voice low. "You really shouldn't think about those things. They're just stories." I shrugged off her warning, but her expression worried me. I spent the day trying to focus, but I felt like I was losing grip on reality. What if the stories were true? What if I was next? By evening I decided I couldn't stay cooped up. I needed to get out to clear my head. I put on my boots and stepped into the winter chill. The biting air felt refreshing, but as I walked, unease settled in. The town was eerily quiet. I noticed how the shadows stretched long, obscuring the corners of the street. I reached the park near the edge of town. The trees loomed large, their bare branches clacking together in the wind. Suddenly a sound broke through the silence, a soft tap, tap, tap. I froze, every nerve on high alert. I wheeled around, scanning the area, and that's when I saw her. A girl, maybe 10 or 11, stood between the trees. Her hair hung in tangled strands, her face pale and expressionless. She pointed towards the old schoolhouse down the street. I squinted, my heart racing. What was she doing out here alone? "Are you lost?" I called out, edging closer. But she just continued to point, her hand steady and rigid. I felt drawn to her, something compelling me to follow. I took a step for her direction, but as I did, the air turned frigid. Confronted by another wave of fear, I hesitated. "Please, help us," she whispered, her voice barely discernible above the wind. "Help you with what?" I asked, straining to hear. But she didn't respond. Instead, she turned abruptly and dashed into the trees. I wanted to call after her, but something in me held back. I glanced around. Was this a trap? I wanted to flee, but I felt rooted to the spot, as if the shadows of the trees had a grip on me. I took a deep breath and rushed back towards the lights of the town, breaking into a run. When I finally reached home, I slammed the door behind me and locked it tight. The tapping came against the window again, but now it seemed urgent. I held my breath, staring into the darkness. There was no girl, just the familiar twist of shadows. Then I remembered the girl's eyes, how hollow they seemed, how desperate, and just then the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling. That's when I heard the whisper again, clearer now. "You're one of us." My heart raced. What did that mean? I felt clarity wash over me, but it was a chilling clarity that terrified me. I was not just a teacher in a small town anymore. I was part of something much bigger. And that was just the beginning. The next morning I woke with a sense of dread. Sleep had come slowly, filled with fragments of dreams that twisted into shadows and whispers. I pushed myself out of bed and glanced out the window. Snow blanketed Pine Brook, covering everything in a silent white. It looked serene, but I felt anything but peaceful. As I got ready for the day, I couldn't shake the girl's face from my mind. Her haunting plea followed me, lingering in the corners of my thoughts. I decided to ignore it all. My students needed me, and I couldn't let paranoia distract me. I trekked to school, the crunch of snow underfoot oddly comforting. The moment I stepped into my classroom, the children's laughter filled the air. It was a welcome sound, one that grounded me for a fleeting moment. But then, during morning announcements, an unsettling rumor began to spread. "Did you hear about the old schoolhouse?" one of my students asked, wide-eyed. "What about it?" I responded, trying to keep my tone light. "People say it's haunted. They say you can see the ghosts from the street at night." He grinned, unaware of the shudder that ran down my spine. "Just stories," I echoed Sarah's warning, but the unsettled looks from my students told me they didn't believe me. I brushed their chatter aside, but during recess the lingering unease returned. I stepped outside, needing fresh air. As I watched the kids play, I caught sight of the old schoolhouse down the street. Was someone looking back? I squinted, but the snow blinded me to anything beyond a thick white veil. As the day dragged on, I felt time slipping away, and with it, my resolve. I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. That night, when darkness fell, I made a decision. I'd return to the schoolhouse. I needed to know if the stories were true, and if the girl had been real. After classes, I drove to the old building, the wheels crunching over frozen gravel. My heart pounded as I stepped onto the property. The schoolhouse loomed, its dark windows hollow like the girl's eyes. A low wind hissed, and just then the taps began again, a steady rhythm coming from somewhere inside. I hesitated at the door. I wanted to turn around, to run back to the safety of my car, but something pushed me forward, an invisible thread tugging at my heart. I unlatched the door and stepped inside. Dust swirled in the muted light, and the air felt thick. I scanned the darkness, holding my breath. That's when I noticed a piece of paper on the floor, half buried under rubble. I picked it up and read the faded words. "We need you to break the curse." Chilled, I felt a presence behind me, but turned too late. An icy gust swept through the room, and the door slammed shut, echoing through the empty halls. Panic surged in my chest. Just then, the tapping returned, now louder, frantic. I spun around, heart racing. The shadows seemed to twist and shift, forming shapes that were no longer just distractions. They were watching, waiting. Then I heard it again. "You're one of us." In that moment I realized I couldn't just walk away. I was woven into whatever was happening here, and I had to find out what that meant. The sudden chill made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I stood there, frozen in the dim light of the schoolhouse, unable to comprehend what I had just heard. "You're one of us." The words echoed in my mind, sending more tremors through me than the cold air. Before I could think it through, the tapping grew stronger, as if someone or something was directly calling out for me. The sound seemed to beckon me further into the dark corners of the building. Without thinking, I took a few tentative steps forward. The floor creaked and protested beneath my weight, as if warning me against my curiosity. I felt my heart settle into a steady rhythm, overriding the fear threatening to consume me. There was something intoxicating about the unknown, and despite every rational bone in my body telling me to turn back, I moved deeper into the schoolhouse. A sinking feeling washed over me as I passed through what used to be the main classroom. Desks lay overturned, coated in dust, remnants of lessons long forgotten. I could almost see the children sitting at those desks, their laughter reverberating off the walls and the warmth of their innocent joy. But that warmth had been replaced with a chill that seeped into my bones. The tapping continued, leading me toward the back of the room. It sounded almost melodic now, a ghostly rhythm echoing in the silence. I reached the back wall, where a chalkboard hung askew. I leaned closer, and before I could stop myself, I knocked against the chalkboard with my knuckles. Suddenly, in response, the tapping stopped. A heavy silence blanketed the space. My breath quickened and I leaned in further, pressing my ear against the board. Just then I heard a whisper. Soft, insistent, pleading. "Help us!" I pulled back sharply, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who are you?" I asked, the tremor in my voice clear. The room sighed, almost as if it had heard my question and was weighing whether or not to answer. The faint scratching returned, drawing my eyes back to the dusty floor. There were symbols etched into the wood, nearly obscured by years of neglect. I bent down for a closer look. They were shapes, strange, looping designs that seemed almost like writing. I reached out, brushing my fingers over one of the symbols, and the air around me shifted. I gasped as I felt a sudden rush of energy pulse through me. It was as if the very spirit of the schoolhouse awakened, flooding the room with a sense of urgency. The whispers began again, more frantic this time. "Restore us. Free us." My mind raced, piecing together the fragments of past rumors and stories that had been passed around town. This wasn't just about ghosts. They were souls caught in some cycle, seeking release. I had stepped into something much deeper than I had expected. Then everything grew abruptly quiet. I pivoted to leave, but the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. My breath hitched in my throat, and panic coursed through me. I felt dizzy, the shadows swirling faster around me. Just when I thought I was truly alone, a figure emerged from the depths of the darkness. A girl. The same girl from my dreams, her expression etched with sorrow and yearning. "Help us," she pleaded once more, and the air around me thickened with dread. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The girl stepped closer, the faint light illuminating her delicate features and wide, desperate eyes. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're different," she replied, her voice soft like a breeze. "You have the power to set us free." I blinked in disbelief. "Free from what? What do you want from me?" She lowered her gaze, the sadness deepening on her face. "We're trapped in this place. We came here for knowledge, but fear took hold. They never let us leave." As she spoke, the whispers intensified, an eerie chorus rising and falling like a wave. "Help us. Restore us." Each plea felt like jagged ice slicing through my resolve. I wanted to turn and run to escape whatever this was, but the sinking look in her eyes tethered me in place. "What do you need me to do?" Her eyes brightened for a moment. "The symbols, they're part of it. You must understand them, and then maybe you can help us cross over." The darkness around us seemed to grow heavier as I glanced down at the floor where the symbols lay. "But how?" I asked, panic rising. "Find the truth," she urged, her voice more insistent. "Only then can the others be freed." Just then the temperature plummeted. I gasped as icy breath brushed against my neck. "Who's there?" I yelled, looking around for any signs of life. Anything but this girl who kept fading in and out. A shadow moved swiftly to my left, and I turned sharply, breathing heavily. And that's when I saw it. Another symbol glowing faintly under the rubble of fallen desks. I bent down to inspect it, heart thudding in my chest. "What is this?" I muttered, fingers trembling as I hovered over the symbol. The girl's voice grew urgent. "Touch it. You'll understand." I hesitated, my instincts warning me to back away. But I couldn't ignore the desperation in her tone. I pressed my palm against the symbol, and a surge of energy shot through me. Images flooded my mind. Children laughing, teachers guiding lessons. But then they all twisted into images of fear. They were trapped in some twisted cycle, their innocent joy replaced by terror. A loud crack echoed through the schoolhouse, and I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet. "Don't let them take you!" the girl screamed, her voice almost lost in the chaos. I ripped my hand away, gasping for air. "What's happening?" I shouted as a shadow loomed behind her. "Protect yourself," she called out just as the figure lunged forward. I stumbled backward, barely dodging the icy grasp of whatever it was. Then, in one swift motion, the girl vanished. The whispers turned into a deafening roar that filled the room. Panic surged through me. I had to escape. I darted toward the door, but it was still locked tight. The darkness pressed in around me, and my breath quickened. I could hear the growl of something sinister closing in. "Help us!" rang out once more, but this time it was clear. The voices were coming from the walls. I had to find another way, and soon. Otherwise I might end up one of them. I turned frantically, scanning the dim room for a way out. The whispers continued, their urgent pleas clawing at my sanity. I could feel the cold breath behind me again, the chill deepening as if the very essence of dread was closing in. My heart drummed in my chest as the darkness thickened. Think, I muttered to myself, forcing down the rising panic. I couldn't just stand here. The walls felt like they were closing in. Just to my right, a window. I rushed over, praying I could either break it or squeeze through. The glass was thick, the frame sturdy. I slammed my fists against it, but the sound fell flat against the oppressive atmosphere. I stepped back, breathing heavily. This wasn't good. A shudder raced through the floor, a warning that sent me stumbling back onto my butt. "Get up!" I hissed at myself, scrambling to my feet. My eyes darted back to the symbols. They held something, a key perhaps. I glanced down again, trying to make sense of the glowing images. There were more symbols interspersed with each other, forming a frantic web. Each symbol pulsed slightly, like a heartbeat, each followed by a whisper. "Free us," they pleaded. I could feel their urgency washing over me. The girl's face flooded my mind. "You must understand them." My urge to help gripped me again, forcing me to confront the fear gnawing at my insides. I focused on one symbol in particular. It looked like the sun being eclipsed by a shadow. "What are you trying to tell me?" I whispered, pressing my palm gently against it. A shockwave of images surged through me. It was like I was skimming through a dreamscape of the school's past. A teacher unveiling mysteries, the laughter of children fading into silence, shadows creeping into their smiles. With each new image, sorrow built within me and my chest tightened. I could feel their loss. I was part of this now. The whispers intensified and the shadow shifted, breaking my concentration. I scanned the room again. The figure that had lunged at me earlier was lurking just beyond the dim light. A silhouette watching, waiting for a moment to strike. I couldn't lose focus. I gathered what little courage I had left, steeling myself. "I need to know the truth. Let me see more," I shouted at the shadows, as if they might give in to my demand. That's when I saw the others, the children. Their faces, twisted in eternal fear, blinked into existence around the symbols. They were trapped, their expressions frozen in time. My hands trembled against the symbols, and I could feel warmth spreading from my fingertips. "I won't let you suffer like this," I shouted, hoping against hope that my voice would rise above the chaos. With a sudden clarity, a new symbol flickered into view at the edge of my peripheral. It wasn't just glowing. It pulsed with urgency, as if it needed me. As I reached out, the shadows surged forward, and a deep growl shattered the air, shaking the ground beneath me. "They're coming," I realized, fear clawing at my throat. My fingers brushed against the edge of the new symbol, and in that moment everything shifted. The world around me blurred, and the voices grew deafening. I was being pulled in, dragged further into the heart of whatever darkness haunted this place. But before I could understand what was happening, the ground cracked open beneath me and I fell into the void. Everything went black. I fell and fell, my stomach lurching. The whispers vanished, replaced by an all-consuming silence. I braced myself for impact, but when I landed, it felt like I slid onto a surface covered in ice, cold and unyielding. I opened my eyes, the dim light filtering through a thick gray fog. It took a moment to adjust, but when I did, I realized I was no longer in the room. I was in a vast, empty space, hard and featureless, stretching endlessly in every direction. Panic bubbled up again. Where am I? As I stood, I could make out shapes swirling in the mist. Shadows flickered at the corners of my vision, and the whispers slowly returned, echoing around me like a ghostly choir. "Help us. Find us. Free us." Fighting the urge to bolt, I took a cautious step forward. My breath came out in wisps swirling in the cold air. I glanced down, and that's when I noticed something glinting in the fog, a small, silver key. It lay not far from my foot, glimmering insistently as if it wanted to be picked up. I hesitated, unsure of what it would unlock. But the whispers seemed to amplify, pushing me closer. I crouched down, fingers shaking with nerves. The moment I touched it, a jolt shot through me. Instantly, a flood of memories crashed over me, faces of the children entwined with those symbols, joy turning into despair. They were reaching out, their tiny hands disappearing into dark pits in the ground. Pulling back as if the key burned, I struggled to breathe. "What happened to you?" I whispered, horror bubbling inside me. I felt their pain, a palpable weight pressing down on my heart. Suddenly, the fog began to part, and I spotted something in the distance. A faint glow pulsed like a heartbeat, growing stronger as I approached. Hope surged within me, guiding my steps. As I moved, the shadows seemed to yawn and stretch, whispering warnings that I could barely understand. Then everything changed. The glow darkened, replaced by a deep crimson that flickered like a dying ember. The whispers turned into shrieks, cascading around me like a storm. "Stay away! Run!" I turned to flee, but the ground beneath me trembled. Chunks of ice cracked apart, creating chasms that yawned like screaming mouths. My heart raced as I scrambled backward, grappling with the icy surface. I could see shadows forming, figures swarming around the edge of the light, threatening to consume me. "No!" I shouted, anger fueling my fear. "I'm not here to hurt you." I clutched the key tightly. "I want to help." Just then I saw her again, the girl from before. She stood among the shadows, her translucent form flickering with each pulse of crimson light. Her eyes locked onto mine, filled with a mixture of hope and urgency. "Use it!" she cried, pointing at the key. "It's the only way." But as I stepped closer, the darkness coiled around her, pulling her backward, cutting off her voice. I felt a jolt hit me again. In that moment of clarity, I knew I had a choice. Trust the key or turn back to the shadows. My heart pounded as I faced the overwhelming dark. That's when I saw it, the silhouettes beginning to coalesce around me. They were not just shadows, they looked like anguished forms of the children, and they were not going to let me leave easily. The shadows closed in tighter, a swirling mass of fear and despair. I could see their faces more clearly now. Their eyes were wide, pleading, mouths forming silent screams. I couldn't just stand there. Panic wrapped itself around me like a vice. I had to do something. "Stay back," I shouted, trying to project strength I didn't feel. I held up the key, feeling its cold metal bite into my palm. "I don't want to hurt you," I want to help." As if in response, a chilling wind swept through the space, making the air thick and hard to breathe. The shadows hesitated for a moment, and it felt like a chance. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and threw the key into the swirling fog. "I don't know what you want from me, but I trust this." The key spun, glowing with an ethereal light, illuminating the dark around me. The whispers intensified, almost deafening. "Free us. Please." Suddenly a sharp tugging sensation yanked me forward. The mist swirled, forming a pathway. I followed it, heart racing. The girl's face appeared again, more defined this time. "You have to find the door," she urged. I glanced around but saw nothing resembling a door. Only shadows, shadows, and more shadows, and, as I ran, I stumbled, my foot catching on a protruding piece of ice. I fell hard, my breath knocked out of me. Dizziness blurred my vision, and the shadows loomed closer, their low murmurs morphing into a cacophony of cries. I scrambled to my feet, desperation clawing at me. I had to escape. That's when I saw it, a faint outline shimmering against the fog, a door, old and weathered, but unmistakably there. Relief flooded through me, but I quickly realized the shadows surged forward, reaching for me. I sprinted toward the door, every step feeling heavier, as if the ground was trying to pull me back. "Help us!" they cried, their voices mingling with the wind. The shadows were right on my heels, brushing against the fabric of my clothes, almost like icy fingers trying to claim me. I reached the door, flung it wide open, and collapsed through the threshold. The moment I crossed over, I felt a powerful force push me back. I staggered to regain my balance, but the door began to close gradually at first. "No!" I shouted, fumbling to reach it. I thrust my arm back through the narrowing gap, trying to maintain contact with this new reality. Instantly, a rush of memories flooded into my mind again, images of children playing, laughing, and then falling into darkness, reaching out for someone. The door closed with a clang, leaving me on the other side. I leaned against it, gasping for breath, peering into the thick fog behind me. The shadows now pressed against the door, their faces contorted in desperation, silently begging for freedom. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "How do I help you?" But there was no answer. Instead, an overwhelming silence fell. The echoes of their cries lingered like a heavy fog. And then, just when I thought I could breathe again, the key materialized back in my hand. It pulsed softly and felt warm now, alive, with energy. My heart sank. What else had I unleashed? As I prepared to find a way back, I sensed a presence lurking behind me. I turned slowly, dread washing over me. The faint glow flickered, and I realized I wasn't alone. There was something else here, something much worse than shadows. I could feel a chill creeping down my spine as I slowly turned. The air around me felt heavier, almost suffocating, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. The glow from the key flickered, lighting up the small space I found myself in. That's when I saw it. A figure, dark and indistinct, hovered in the corner. It was taller than me, with a shifting shape that seemed both human and not. I couldn't make out its face, just the outline, the feeling of eyes boring into me. My heart raced. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. "Who are you?" I managed to stutter out, my voice barely above a whisper. No reply came. Instead, the figure swayed slightly, and shadows from the walls seemed to stretch toward it as if drawn to a magnet. The key in my hand warmed against my skin, almost pulsing with urgency. "Do you want the key?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Is that it?" As if sensing my fear, the figure advanced toward me. A rush of cold air accompanied it, making my breath fog up in front of my face. I could feel panic rising in my chest. "Stay back," I yelled, but it was futile. The darkness surrounded me as it grew closer. The figure reached out its hand, but it was not human. It was a mass of shadowy tendrils that seemed to twist and writhe like snakes. I felt the atmosphere change, thickening with dread as the shadows began to whisper again. "Release us." Their words echoed all around me, the urgency rising with each word. No, I won't help you, I shouted, clenching the key tighter. I remembered the faces, the helpless children, the sorrow in their eyes. They needed help. But was that what this thing wanted? I had to think fast. A memory sparked in my mind. The girl's face, the last plea in her eyes. Maybe this figure wasn't evil. Maybe it was here to guide me. I took a deep breath, fighting the rising tide of fear. What do you want from me? I said more calmly. How can I set you free? The figure halted. The shadows around it shimmered and stilled, almost like they were listening. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in its form, as if it grasped at my question. Then the whispers shifted, becoming frantic, urging, merging into one voice. The key. Use the key. I raised the key in front of me, gripping it tightly. It felt heavier now, burdened with purpose. I looked around, seeking a lock or mechanism that could bridge the chasm between our worlds. Where was that door? Suddenly I noticed a glimmer beneath the dark fog, a faint outline like another door. My heart leaped. I turned back to the figure. Is that it? In an instant the swirling shadows burst forth from the figure, heading toward the glimmer. I sprinted after them, urgency coursing through me. The door began to capture the light of the key, illuminating the fog like a beacon. The figure remained still, hoping I would follow. But as I reached the edge of the dark, I could feel a transformation taking place. Then everything started to fade to black. The last of the shadows vanished into the door just as it swung open wide before me. I stood frozen for a moment, straddling both worlds. There was no turning back. I took a deep breath and stepped through the door, feeling the air shift around me like water parting. I stumbled into an entirely new place, one filled with warmth and light. The cold, wailing shadows from the other side faded to a dull roar behind me, and I blinked against the brightness surrounding me. Suddenly I was in the old schoolhouse, standing in sunlight streaming through the windows. I gasped for air, my heart still racing. It felt unreal, as if I'd left the darkness behind and pulled back into reality. But when I turned, the shadows were not entirely gone. They lingered at the edges of my vision, shifting in the corners of the room, a constant reminder of what I had faced. Help us, echoed through my mind, but it was softer now, like a fading memory. I felt an urge to understand, to fix everything, the weight of untold stories pressing down on me. I glanced down at the key, still warm in my palm. As I examined it, I noticed intricate symbols shimmering across its surface, the same ones I'd seen in the schoolhouse basement. I wondered if my actions had meant anything at all. Had I freed those lost souls, or simply exchanged one prison for another? A knock at the door startled me. I turned, adrenaline surging again as the familiar tapping returned. Hesitating, I opened the door cautiously. There stood Sarah, looking relieved and slightly concerned. I was just about to check on you. Are you all right? I managed a weak smile, my mind still a whirlpool of confusion. I think so. I need to tell you everything that happened. As I spoke, I noticed the light flickering in and out around us. The shadows still danced, and the whispers felt like they were fluttering just beyond the realm of understanding. What had truly happened on the other side? Had I helped those children, or had I just opened a new door to their despair? It all felt too ambiguous to unpack. Did you hear that? Sarah suddenly asked, her gaze darting to the darkened corners of the room. What? I replied, my heart pounding again. It sounded like voices. I thought I heard children, she murmured, taking a hesitant step back. The tapping intensified behind me, echoing against the walls. My instincts screamed at me to flee, to ignore it all, to pretend it never happened. But then, a realization washed over me. I had a choice to make. The connection I felt to the girl's pleas remained imbued in the air, and if my understanding had shifted, perhaps I could do more. I took a cautious step forward, gripping the key. Maybe we don't have to ignore this, I said slowly, a new purpose igniting inside me. There's a way to heal whatever is left in this place. Sarah blinked at me, confusion clouding her expression. What do you mean? But before I could answer, a sharp chill swept through the room, and an echo flared to life, melding into the whispers of forgotten children. I could feel it building inside me, an echo of the shadows that whispered now in urgent tones, surrounding Sarah and me. "Together," I said, resolute, my voice trembling but steady. "Maybe we can find a way to help them. We need to face whatever this is." As I looked into Sarah's eyes, a blend of fear and determination met my own. Questions filled my mind. Fear clawed at my insides. But so did hope. I realized then that the resolution might not come as a final answer, but as a journey toward understanding, one that would continue to echo long after I had escaped the walls of that shadowy schoolhouse. With the whispers around us intensifying, I stepped into the next chapter of this unpredictable story, unsure of what would happen next, but knowing I must embrace the uncertainty, a choice worth making.